The Galactic Union had a problem. Nobody wanted to talk about it, but everyone knew it existed. 11 cubs were sitting in a quarantine bay on Station 7, and no species in the entire galaxy wanted to take care of them. They were the most dangerous predators anyone had ever seen. When they grew up, they stood 7 feet tall. Their bodies were covered in scales as black as space itself. They had claws that could cut through metal walls like paper. Their teeth could bite through almost anything. Every species in the galaxy feared them, and for good reason. They had fought wars against dozens of civilizations and won most of them. 3 months ago, a colony ship had exploded near Station 7. The reactor had failed and the ship had broken apart in seconds. Almost everyone on board had died. But somehow, 11 cubs had survived. They were found floating in an emergency pod, hungry and scared and alone. Now they sat in the quarantine bay, and nobody knew what to do with them. They refused to take them. They were a gentle species with soft bodies and thin bones. One accidental swipe from a cub could kill them. The meth also refused. They were plant eaters who became terrified at the sight of sharp teeth. The unified collective said they did not believe in raising individual children. Every species had an excuse, and every excuse meant the same thing. They were afraid. The cubs grew more wild with each passing week. They fought with each other. They refused to eat. They screamed and howled at night. Station security had to stun them twice when they tried to break out of the quarantine bay. Some officials began to whisper that maybe the cubs should be put down. It would be safer for everyone, they said. It would be a mercy. That was when Park arrived. She was from Earth, sent to Station 7 for a simple research project. She was 28 years old and small for a human, barely reaching 5'3". She had dark hair that she kept tied back and eyes that always seemed to be thinking about something. She spoke softly and moved carefully and seemed like the least dangerous person on the entire station. During her first week, she attended a briefing where the station administrator mentioned the cubs. His name was, and he was with pale blue skin and worried eyes. He explained the situation quickly, like he wanted to move past it. Raised her hand. "I would like to see them," she said. The room went silent, stared at her like she had lost her mind. "Dr. Park," he said slowly, "these are cubs. Even at their current size, each one is strong enough to tear you apart. Their claws can cut through steel. Their bite force is greater than any predator on your planet. They are not pets." "I understand," said. "I would still like to see them." Tried to argue with her. He showed her reports about violence. He explained that the cubs had already hurt 3 security officers who got too close. He told her that going into that room would be suicide. Listened to all of it. Then she asked again to see the cubs. Finally gave up. He assigned 2 security officers to escort her to the quarantine bay, though he made it clear they would not enter the room with her. They would wait outside, ready to stun the cubs if things went wrong. The quarantine bay was in the lower levels of the station, far from the areas where people lived and worked. The corridor leading to it was cold and empty. The lights flickered. The air smelled stale. The security officers stopped at a heavy metal door. One of them looked at with something like pity in his eyes. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. Nodded. "Open the door, please." The door slid open, and a wave of smell hit her. The room beyond was dark and dirty. It smelled like fear and unwashed bodies and old food. Could see shapes moving in the shadows. 11 pairs of golden eyes turned to look at her. She stepped inside. The door closed behind her. For a long moment, nothing happened. The cubs watched her from the corners of the room. They were smaller than adult, but still bigger than her. The largest one was already nearly 6 feet tall. Their scales were dirty and dull. Their eyes were wild and suspicious. Did not move toward them. She did not speak. She simply sat down on the cold floor, pulled a ration bar from her pocket and began to eat. The cubs did not know what to make of this. They had expected her to scream or run or try to hurt them like the security officers had. They had not expected her to sit on their floor and eat food like she belonged there. Minutes passed, finished her ration bar and pulled out another one. She ate slowly, calmly, like she had nowhere else to be. The smallest cub moved first. He was about 4 feet tall, with a torn ear from fighting with his siblings. He crept forward on all fours, his golden eyes fixed on the strange human. When he got close, he growled deep in his throat. Did not flinch. She did not look away. She just broke off a piece of her ration bar and held it out toward him. The cub stared at the food. He stared at her. His growl faded into confusion. Slowly, carefully, he reached out and snatched the food from her hand. Then he ran back to the shadows and ate it so fast he almost choked. A few seconds later, he came back for more. Smiled and broke off another piece. By the end of that first day, 3 cubs had taken food from her hand. By the end of the first week, she had moved her sleeping mat into the quarantine bay. She ate with them, slept near them, and talked to them in a soft voice even though they did not understand her words. The station officials thought she was crazy. The other humans on the station thought she was brave but foolish. The alien species thought she was proving what they had always believed about humans. They had no survival instincts. They did not understand danger, but understood something that none of them did. She had grown up reading about wolves and dogs. She knew that thousands of years ago, humans had taken the most dangerous predators on their planet and turned them into family. She knew that humans had a gift for seeing past teeth and claws to the frightened creatures underneath. These cubs were not monsters. They were children who had watched their parents die. They were orphans who had been locked in a cage and treated like animals. They needed someone to show them that the universe was not all darkness and fear. On the day she filed the paperwork to become their legal guardian, called her into his office. "This is madness," he said. "You cannot raise 11 cubs. You are one human. They will kill you." Looked at him calmly. "They have had many chances to kill me already," she said. "They have not taken any of them. Because they are still young. When they grow larger, when their instincts fully develop, then I will teach them to control those instincts," said. "That is what parents do." Had no answer for that. He stamped the paperwork and watched her leave, shaking his head in disbelief. That night returned to the quarantine bay. The smallest cub, whose name she had learned was waiting for her at the door. He had started following her everywhere, staying close to her like a shadow. "Hello, little one," she said softly. Made a rumbling sound in his chest. It was almost like a purr. Sat down beside him and put her hand on his head. His scales were rough under her fingers but warm. He leaned into her touch, and for the first time since she had met him, the wildness in his eyes began to fade. She had made a promise to herself that first night in the quarantine bay. She would never let anyone hurt these children again. She intended to keep that promise. 2 years had passed since Park walked into a quarantine bay and changed everything. Station 7 had seen many strange things over the years. Alien diplomats with bodies made of living crystal, ships that traveled through folded space, machines that could translate any language in seconds. But nothing was stranger than the sight of a small human woman walking through the commercial district with 11 young following behind her. The cubs had grown so much. The oldest now stood 6 feet tall and was still getting bigger. His shoulders were broad, and his claws had grown long and sharp. The only female among them had developed beautiful patterns on her scales that shimmered like oil on water. The other species said those patterns meant she would become a pack leader someday. And then there was the smallest cub, the one with the torn ear, the first one to take food from his hand. He was still smaller than his siblings, but he had grown strong and fierce. He rarely left side. When she walked, he walked beside her. When she sat, he sat near her feet. When she slept, he slept outside her door. The other species on the station gave them plenty of space. When they walked through a corridor, everyone moved aside. Merchants closed their stall shutters. Parents pulled their children close. Even the security officers looked nervous when the pack passed by. They noticed all of this. Their golden eyes tracked every movement, every flinch, every whispered word. They had learned to recognize fear in every species on the station. They smelled it, heard it, felt it in the way people moved away from them. But they did not react the way people expected. One day, a merchant dropped a box of delicate glass items. The box broke open, and dozens of small figurines scattered across the floor. The merchant looked up and froze. One of the middle cubs was standing right there, towering over him. The expected violence. He closed his eyes and waited for claws to tear into him. Instead, he heard a gentle clicking sound. He opened his eyes and saw carefully picking up the figurines, one by one. This massive claws handled the tiny glass objects with surprising gentleness. When all the figurines were gathered, placed them back in the box and handed it to the trembling merchant. "You dropped these," said. His voice was deep and rough, but his words were polite. The merchant could only stare as walked away to rejoin his siblings. Stories like this began to spread through the station. The cubs who helped an old meth carry her bags. The cubs who stepped aside when station children ran past, careful not to bump into them. The cubs who waited patiently outside shops while their human mother talked with friends, never complaining, never causing trouble. It confused people. This was not how we're supposed to behave. Dr. Sung-ho was one of the few people on the station who was not afraid of the cubs. He was another human, a researcher who had become closest friend over the past 2 years. He often joined her family for meals, watching in amazement as the cubs devoured enough food to feed 20 humans. "How do you do it?" he asked one evening. They were sitting in quarters while the cubs ate their dinner in the next room. The sounds of tearing meat and crunching bones came through the walls. "They are supposed to be killing machines. How did you turn them into this?" Smiled, she reached over to scratch behind's torn ear. The young was sitting beside her, and at her touch, his eyes half closed with pleasure. A deep rumbling sound came from his chest, almost like a cat's purr. "They are not killing machines, Sung-ho," she said. "They are children. They just needed someone to teach them how to be part of something bigger than themselves." "The pack," said. He had entered the room silently, moving with a grace that seemed impossible for someone his size. His voice was deep and rough, but his Korean was clear. Had insisted all the cubs learn to speak it. "Mother teaches us that the pack is everything. We protect what is ours." Sung-ho looked at the massive with wide eyes. "And am I?" he asked, only half joking. "You are Mother's friend," said, appearing beside her brother. "So you are pack. We would die for pack." The casual way she said it made Sung-ho's skin prickle. He looked at who only shrugged. "Culture is very focused on loyalty," she explained. "I have tried to guide it rather than suppress it. They understand that protecting the pack does not always mean violence. Sometimes it means patience. Sometimes it means kindness. Sometimes it means knowing when not to fight." "But you would fight if you had to," Sung-ho said too. It was not really a question. His golden eyes met his. "For Mother, I would tear this station apart with my bare claws. So would all of us." The room was quiet for a moment. Even the eating sounds from the next room had stopped. Sung-ho realized that all 11 cubs were now listening. "But Mother has taught us that such things should be a last resort," continued. "She says that true strength is control. True power is choosing not to destroy. Humans have a saying," added. His voice was softer than but no less intense. "Walk softly and carry a big stick. Mother explained it to us. It means you do not need to show your teeth to prove you are dangerous." Sung-ho looked at with new respect. "You taught them that?" "I taught them many things," said. "But they taught me things too, about loyalty, about family, about what it means to belong somewhere." Later that night, after Sung-ho had gone home, sat on the observation deck and watched the stars. The cubs were scattered around her, some sleeping, some talking quietly among themselves, was pressed against her side, his warmth keeping away the chill of the recycled air. She thought about the day she had first walked into that quarantine bay. She had been so scared. Her heart had been pounding so hard she thought the cubs must have heard it, but she had sat down anyway. She had offered food. She had stayed. Now she had 11 children who loved her with a fierceness that sometimes frightened her. They would do anything for her, kill for her, die for her. She had tried to teach them gentleness and patience, but underneath all of that they were still predators, and their love was not a gentle thing. Sometimes she wondered if she had made the right choice, taking in these children, raising them as her own, teaching them to love her. What would happen when they were fully grown? What would happen if someone threatened her? What would happen if she could not control them anymore? But then would look up at her with his golden eyes, and she would remember why she had done it. These children had been abandoned. They had been scheduled for death. Everyone in the galaxy had looked at them and seen monsters. Had looked at them and seen her family. Mother said softly, "What are you thinking about?" Put her arm around him. His scales were warm under her touch. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," she said. Made that purring sound again. "We are the lucky ones, Mother. Before you came, we were alone. Now we have pack, now we have home." Looked up from where she was lying. "We made a promise, Mother, all of us. We will never let anyone hurt you. No matter what happens, we will protect you." Felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them away and smiled. "I know you will, and I will always protect you too." She did not know then how soon that promise would be tested. She did not know that in just a few short months, she would be lying in a hospital bed fighting for her life while her children stood guard outside. But even if she had known, she would not have changed anything. This was her family, this was her pack. And nothing in the universe could ever change that. It started like any other day. Woke up early, ate breakfast with her cubs, and went to teach her morning class. She was giving a lecture on xenobiology to a group of young researchers from different species. The classroom was full of eager faces and was explaining how different life forms had evolved on different planets. Was waiting outside the lecture hall, as he always did. He had grown too big to fit comfortably in the classroom chairs, and some of the students were nervous around him. So he waited in the corridor, listening to his mother's voice through the door, ready to escort her to her next appointment. Inside the classroom was drawing a diagram on the display screen. She was explaining how scales worked, how they could change color based on mood and temperature. The students were fascinated. Most of them had never been this close to anyone who actually knew personally. Then the pain hit. It came without warning, like a blade of fire through her stomach. Gasped and dropped her stylus. Her hand went to her abdomen. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. The students stared at her in confusion. One of them, a young human named, stood up. "Dr. Park, are you okay?" Tried to answer, but another wave of pain crashed through her. Her knees buckled. She fell to the floor, and that was when she saw the blood spreading across her shirt. The classroom erupted in panic. Students scrambled for the door, calling for help. But before anyone else could reach her, the door burst open and was there. He had heard her cry of pain through the walls. He had smelled her blood the moment it left her body. Now he was at her side, his massive form moving with desperate speed. His claws retracted automatically as he scooped her up in his arms, cradling her against his chest like she weighed nothing. "Mother," his voice was raw with fear. "Mother, what is happening?" Could barely speak. The pain was too intense. She could feel something tearing inside her, something leaking where it should not leak. Her vision was starting to blur at the edges. "Hospital," she managed to whisper. "Take me, hospital." Did not wait for anyone to tell him what to do. He ran. The station had never seen a move at full speed before. Tore through the corridors like a black storm, his powerful legs eating up the distance between the classroom and the medical bay. People screamed and dove out of his way. Security alarms began to blare, but did not stop. He did not slow down. His mother was dying in his arms and nothing else mattered. Across the station, the other cubs felt something change. Was in the training room practicing combat forms. He stopped mid-movement, his head snapping up. Something was wrong. He could feel it in his bones, a pulling sensation in his chest that pointed toward. Was in the library, reading about human history. She dropped her book and stood up so fast that she knocked over her chair. Her scales began to shift to a darker color, the color of battle. Was helping in the cargo bay. He left without a word, ignoring the confused calls of the workers behind him. One by one, all 11 cubs stopped what they were doing and began to run. They did not know exactly what had happened. They did not need to know. Pack instinct was stronger than words. Their mother was in danger and they had to reach her. Arrived at the medical bay just as his legs were about to give out. He had run faster than he had ever run in his life, and even his endurance had limits. He crashed through the doors and nearly collided with a startled nurse. "Help her," he roared. "She is bleeding, help her." The medical staff took one look at the blood-soaked human in his arms and sprang into action. Doctor, the human doctor on duty, ran forward and began checking vital signs. Her face went pale as she read the results. "Internal bleeding," she announced. "It looks like her appendix ruptured. She needs surgery right now. Get her to the ICU." A team of nurses surrounded and lifted her onto a gurney. They began rushing her toward the intensive care unit, shouting orders and preparing equipment. Tried to follow, but one of the nurses held up a hand. "You cannot come in," she said. Her voice was trembling, but she stood her ground. "The surgery room must be sterile. Please wait here." His claws extended involuntarily. His eyes were wild with fear and rage. "She is my mother. I will not leave her." "You have to," doctor said firmly. She was not afraid of him, or if she was, she did not show it. "If you come in, you could contaminate the room. You could make things worse. The best thing you can do for her is wait." For a terrible moment, looked like he might attack her anyway. His muscles were tensed, his fangs were showing, and a low growl was building in his throat. Then his hand landed on his shoulder. His voice was calm but commanding. "Let them help her." Whirled around. His brother stood behind him, and behind were and all the others. All 11 cubs had arrived. They filled the corridor with their massive bodies, their golden eyes all fixed on the door where their mother had disappeared. "She is dying," said. His voice cracked. "I can smell it. I can smell her blood. She is dying and I cannot do anything." "Yes, you can," said. She moved forward and took a position beside the ICU door. Her scales had shifted to full combat coloration, dark as a starless night. "We can guard." "Guard?" asked. "Until she wakes," said. "We guard this place. We make sure nothing threatens her. We keep watch." It was an old tradition. When a pack member was wounded, the others formed a defensive circle around them. They did not eat, did not sleep, did not move until the wounded one recovered or died. It was a way of showing loyalty, a way of saying that the pack would face any danger together. "Understood." He took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. His claws retracted. His growl faded. He moved to stand beside, taking up a guard position. One by one, the other cubs arranged themselves around the medical wing. They did not threaten anyone. They did not block the medical staff. They simply stood there, 11 young forming a protective wall around the place where their mother was fighting for her life. Station security arrived within minutes. Administrator came personally, flanked by a dozen armed guards. He stopped at the edge of the corridor and stared at the scene before him. "What is happening here?" he demanded. Stepped forward. He was the tallest of the cubs now, nearly matching an adult in height. His golden eyes met the administrator's gaze without flinching. "Our mother is injured," he said simply. "We are protecting her." "Protecting her from what?" from anything that might harm her. Looked at the guards, then back at the cubs. The cubs had not made any aggressive moves. They were not breaking any laws. They were just standing there. But their message was clear. Anyone who wanted to reach Dr. Park would have to go through them first. "Stand down," ordered the guards. "Do not engage unless they attack someone." The guards lowered their weapons, looking relieved. They had no desire to fight 11, even young ones. Turned and walked away. As he left, he heard his voice behind him, soft and broken. "Please do not die, Mother. Please, we need you." In the ICU, the surgery had begun. Doctor worked with steady hands, trying to stop the bleeding, trying to repair the damage. It was going to be a long night. And outside, the cubs stood guard, ready to face anything the universe might throw at them. Their mother had saved them once. Now it was their turn to watch over her. 14 hours passed. The surgery was long and difficult. The appendix had not just ruptured. It had become infected, and the infection had spread through her blood. Twice during the operation, her heart stopped. Twice, doctor brought her back. The cubs knew something was wrong each time it happened. They felt it somehow, a cold shiver that ran through all of them at the same moment. Whimpered. Claws scraped against the floor, closed his eyes and did not open them again until the feeling passed. They did not move from their positions. They did not eat. They did not sleep. They stood guard just as they had promised. Station personnel walked past them throughout the night. Medical staff came and went, bringing supplies and equipment. Security officers patrolled the area, keeping curious onlookers away. Everyone gave the cubs plenty of space, but some of them stopped to stare. They had never seen anything like this. They were known throughout the galaxy as solitary predators. They formed small family groups, but only with blood relatives. They did not adopt outsiders. They did not form bonds with other species. The idea of 11 standing vigil for a human woman went against everything scientists believed about their nature. And yet here they were. Dr. Sung-ho arrived around midnight. He had heard the news and come as fast as he could. When he saw the cubs arranged around the medical wing, he stopped and stared just like everyone else. Then he took a deep breath and walked toward them. The cubs watched him approach. Their golden eyes tracked his movements, but they did not growl or threaten him. He was Pac. He was allowed. "I brought food," Sung-ho said, holding up a bag. "And water you need to eat." Shook his head, "Not hungry." "You have been standing here for 8 hours. You need to eat something or you will collapse." Looked at his younger brother. "Mother would be angry if you collapse from hunger," he said. "Eat. I will watch the door." Hesitated, then took the food that Sung-ho offered. He ate it quickly and without pleasure, chewing mechanically while his eyes stayed fixed on the ICU door. Sung-ho sat down beside. The female glanced at him but did not object to his presence. "Can I ask you something?" Sung-ho said quietly. Nodded. "Why are you doing this? I know you love her, but this is more than love. I have seen families wait for news about loved ones. They pace. They cry. They hold each other. They do not form a military perimeter around the hospital wing." Was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than Sung-ho had ever heard it. "Do you know what it was like in the quarantine bay?" she asked. Sung-ho shook his head. "We were there for 3 months before Mother came. 3 months of sitting in a dark room, waiting for someone to decide our fate. We could hear the people outside talking. The walls were thick, but ears are sharp. We heard everything." Sung-ho felt a chill run down his spine. "What did you hear?" "They called us monsters, beasts. They said we were too dangerous to live. Some of them wanted to kill us. They said it would be a mercy. They said it would be better than letting us grow into the killers we were destined to become." Scales shifted slightly, a ripple of color that Sung-ho could not interpret. "We were children," she continued. "We had just watched our parents die. We were scared and hungry and alone, And outside our cage, people were debating whether to kill us or not. I did not know, Sung-ho whispered. Mother did not know either at first, but it did not matter. She came anyway. This small, soft human who smelled like nothing dangerous. She sat on our floor and ate her food and did not run away when snapped at her. Was she not afraid? She was terrified. We could smell her fear. It came off her in waves, but she stayed anyway, day after day. She brought us food and taught us words and told us stories about Earth. She never treated us like monsters. She treated us like her children. Spoke up from across the corridor. His voice was deeper than rougher around the edges. There was a day when the officials came to take us away. They wanted to separate us, send us to different facilities on different planets. They said it was for our own good. They said we were too dangerous to be kept together. Sung-ho leaned forward. What happened? Mother stood in front of the door, said. This small human woman, facing down a group of armed officials and bureaucrats. She told them they would have to go through her first. She could not have stopped them, Sung-ho said. Not physically. No, agreed. He had been listening from his position by the door. She could not have stopped them, but she was willing to try. She was willing to die rather than let them take us away from each other. The cubs were all looking at Sung-ho now, their golden eyes reflecting the corridor lights. That is why we are here, said. His voice was hoarse from hours of silence. That is why we will not move. She gave everything for us, her time, her career, her safety. She looked at 11 orphan predators and saw a family worth saving. He paused and Sung-ho saw something glittering in the young's eyes. Tears. Was crying. The have a word, continued. Eth, it means the one who makes you whole. The heart of the pack for us, mother, is Eth. Without her, we are nothing. Without her, we are just monsters in a cage again. Sung-ho did not know what to say. He had known for years. He had thought he understood her kindness, her patience, her dedication to her work. But he had never understood just how much she meant to these children. She taught us to be more than what the galaxy expected, said. She taught us that strength is not just about claws and teeth. She taught us that family is not just about blood. Tonight, we give her our vigil. We guard her because she guarded us. We stand watch because she never stopped watching over us. It is the least of what we owe, said quietly. The night continued. The station grew quiet as most of its inhabitants went to sleep, but the cubs did not sleep. They stood in the dim corridor, their breath misting in the cold air, their eyes never leaving the ICU door. Then, as the station's artificial dawn began to brighten the lights, the door finally opened. Every cub surged to their feet, claws extended, fangs showed. They were ready to fight, ready to kill, ready to tear apart anyone who brought bad news. Doctor stepped out. She looked exhausted. Her surgical clothes were stained with blood, but she was smiling. She is stable, she announced. It was a ruptured appendix that went septic. We almost lost her twice, but she is going to be okay. She is going to live. Made a sound that was half sob and half howl. His legs gave out beneath him and he collapsed to his knees, caught him and held him as the smaller cub shook with relief. Tears were streaming down his face now, and he did not try to hide them. Closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Her scales slowly shifted back from combat colors to their normal shade. Leaned against the wall, his head bowed. Can we see her? Asked. Doctor hesitated. She looked at the 11 massive predators filling her corridor and clearly considered saying no. But then she looked at their faces. She saw the desperate hope in their golden eyes. She saw the love that burned there like a fire. 2 at a time, she said finally, and quietly she needs to rest. And went first. They moved silently despite their size, slipping through the door like shadows. The ICU room was full of machines and tubes and softly beeping monitors, but none of that mattered. All that mattered was the small figure lying in the bed. Was pale. She looked fragile and small against the white sheets, but her eyes opened when she felt them enter the room, and she smiled. Hey, she whispered, Her voice was weak, but it was her voice. It was really her. "You are still here." Took her hand very gently. His massive claws could have crushed her bones without effort, but he held her like she was made of glass. "Always, Mother," he said, "always." The story spread faster than light itself. Within hours, everyone on Station 7 knew what had happened. Within days, the news had reached every corner of the Galactic Union. Within weeks, it had become the most discussed story in known space. The cubs who stood vigil for their human mother. The orphan predators who refused to leave until they knew she was safe. The impossible family that made no biological sense but had chosen each other anyway. People did not know what to think. Some called it dangerous. They said was a foolish woman who had given a pack of weapons an emotional reason to fight. What would happen, they asked, if someone hurt her again? What would those cubs do then? They had shown they would do anything for their mother. That kind of loyalty was a threat to everyone around them. Others called it manipulation. Surely the human had used some trick to make the cubs love her. Maybe it was a chemical. Maybe it was some kind of psychological conditioning. Humans were known for their ability to tame wild animals. This was just another example of their strange power over other creatures. But some people, especially the younger ones, saw something different. They saw a family. They saw a group of orphans who had been given a second chance by someone who did not care what species they were. They saw proof that maybe, just maybe, the galaxy was not as cold and cruel as everyone believed. 3 weeks after the surgery, was walking again. She moved slowly, with hovering at her elbow and the other cubs watching her every step. Doctor had told her to rest more, but had never been good at sitting still. Sung-ho came to visit her one afternoon. He found her sitting on the observation deck looking out at the stars. Her cubs were scattered around her, some sleeping, some talking quietly among themselves. It looked peaceful. It looked like a family enjoying a quiet moment together. "They are asking to interview you," Sung-ho said as he sat down beside her. "News networks from a dozen worlds, scientists who study behavior, even a documentary crew from the Empire." Raised an eyebrow. The Empire was famous for never talking to outsiders. They want to understand how you did what their own scientists say is impossible. They are calling it the integration of individuals into multi-species social structures. Laughed, then winced as the movement pulled at her healing stomach. Growled softly beside her, ready to attack whatever was causing her pain. "I did not do anything," said when the pain passed. "I just treated them like people. They did the rest themselves." That is what humans always say. Sung-ho shook his head with a smile. "You adopt wolves and call them dogs. You raise orphaned elephants and release them back to wild herds. You take in children who are not your species and somehow convince the entire galaxy that you are the normal ones." Looked out at the stars. Through the window she could see the spot where the colony ship had exploded 3 years ago. Sometimes she still thought about that night. All those lives lost. All those families destroyed. All those cubs left alone in the dark. "We are social creatures," she said softly. "Pack animals in our own way. Family has never been about blood for humans. It is about choice. It is about love. It is about deciding that someone belongs to you and you belong to them. Even when that someone has claws that can tear through metal." Even then, reached over and put her hand on his head. His scales were warm under her fingers. Especially then, maybe. The ones that everyone else fears are usually the ones who need love the most. From across the observation deck, she watched her children. Was teaching some station children a game. Was reading a book about human history. Was helping a small alien child reach a drinking fountain. They moved through the station like they belonged there, like they had always been part of this strange community of species. 3 years ago, they had been feral and terrified and scheduled for death. Now they were laughing. Sung-ho followed her gaze. "The Galactic Union is reconsidering its policies on integration," he said quietly. Your work has implications beyond just these 11 cubs. If humans can form pack bonds with youth, then maybe they are not as dangerous as everyone thought. Maybe they can be part of the Union after all. They were never monsters, said. That is what I have been trying to tell everyone from the beginning. They are just people. Different from us, yes. Dangerous if threatened, yes. But still people. Still capable of love and loyalty and kindness. She stood up slowly, immediately offered his arm, and she leaned against him. Her son towered over her now, his scales gleaming in the starlight, his golden eyes soft with concern. "Where are you going?" Sung-ho asked. Smiled, "To see my children. We have a lot of work to do." She walked across the observation deck, and her family gathered around her. 11 young, each one capable of killing everyone in this station if they wanted to, and they all looked at her with eyes full of love. Years later, when people asked about that time, she always said the same thing. She had not done anything special. She had just seen children who needed help and decided to help them. Any human would have done the same. But people who knew her better understood the truth. It took a special kind of courage to walk into a room full of predators and offer them food. It took a special kind of love to look at creatures everyone else feared and see a family worth building. That was what humans did. They looked at the universe and saw not just danger but possibility. They looked at monsters and saw children. They looked at the cold emptiness between stars and saw connections waiting to be made. 10 years after that night in the quarantine bay, the first graduates of the Galactic Union's diplomatic program received their official positions. Standing at the front of the group was Ambassador Ark, who had legally taken his human mother's name. In his speech to the assembled diplomats, he said this: "My people were called monsters. My siblings and I were scheduled to be killed because no one believed we could be anything else. Then a small human woman walked into our cage and decided we were worth saving. She taught us that family is a choice. That strength means protecting the weak, that the measure of a civilization is how it treats those it fears. These are human values. Today, they are also values, and we will carry them forward as our mother carried us for as long as we live." In the front row, reached over and squeezed hand. She was older now, her hair touched with gray, but her eyes were still kind, still steady, still the eyes of a woman who had walked into a room full of predators and refused to be afraid. "Thank you, Mother," whispered. Squeezed back, tears rolling down her cheeks, and said what she had always said. "You did the hard part. I just opened the door." Outside the assembly hall, the stars burned bright against the endless dark. Somewhere out there, other orphans were waiting. Other children were being called monsters. Other species were being written off as too dangerous to save. But the humans were out there too, looking, searching, ready to open more doors. That was what humans did. They did not fear monsters. They adopted them.